Okay, guys, we are cruising right along. We are now on another new topic. We are getting into two-dimensional figures, some of which you've already learned before in fourth grade, so some of it will be a review at least for today. And then we're going to move into some other figures like triangles and trapezoids that you may not have learned last year, but are very easy because if you forget the formulas, guess what? They're on the FCAT reference sheet. That's right, the FCAT cheat sheet is what I call it because it gives you everything you need to know. All right, so before we can even talk about area, let's go over a couple things that you need to remember in order for you to do area. First thing you got to remember is, what is a rectangle? What is a rectangle? So you might say it's a four-sided figure. Okay, it's a four-sided figure. And so is this one. But that's not a rectangle. That's what we call a square. So what makes a rectangle a rectangle? Well, it does have four sides like a square, but notice the opposite sides, the ones that are opposite each other, are the same length, but are not the same length as the other opposite sides. These sides over here were much shorter than the ones that were opposite here. So a rectangle is a four-sided figure. Its opposite sides are the same lengths. All right, it has, and I don't know if you remember this, all 90-degree angles that make up the corner. That's going to be important because we are going to talk about parallelograms. And it also can be classified as quadrilateral, which just means four-sided figure. All right, now that we've talked about or remembered what a rectangle is, we now need to remember this word. Let me get this writing. Do you guys remember this one? Perimeter. Now, you've talked about perimeter and area, but do you remember what the perimeter is? Lots of students mix these two up, so I'm going to try to help you remember. And this is what I always taught my 8th graders when I was teaching middle school, is that if you have ever watched a show where there's police officers and there's a bad guy and he's in the building, so let's say this is the bank, and this guy in here is our bank robber. Whoop, he's the bad guy. Bad guy. All right, if we don't want that bad guy to escape, and say we have a window here, and a window here, and a window here, and a window here, if we only put a police officer right here, he could go out all the other windows. So we need to put a police officer over here, and a police officer over here, and a police officer over here. And if you've ever watched, like I said, one of those shows, when they put a police officer all around the outside of a figure to make sure that a bad guy doesn't get away, that's called sealing off the perimeter. So maybe you've heard of that before, I don't know, but that's what they call it when the cops are trying to catch the bad guy and they don't want him to get out any escape routes or any windows or doors. So they put a policeman all the way around, and that's how they catch him. Something else to look at, and I actually have this graphic in my room, is if you look at the word perimeter, look at the word that's in the middle. The word rim. What does rim normally mean? Especially if you play basketball. Exactly. The rim is the outside, you shoot the basket, and the rim is the outside of the basket. So anytime a ball hits the rim, sometimes it ricochets off, sometimes it actually goes shoo right in there. So the rim is the outside, and that might be another way for you to remember perimeter. All right, so let's talk about area. Oftentimes when we discuss area, we start off using graph paper because it sets it up really nicely. I don't know if you guys have rugs. Anybody have a rug in their house? Okay, so you might have a floor. So say this is your floor, okay, nice floor, and maybe it's a wood or tile floor, and then your parents might have one of these things. You guys remember that's a rug, right? But it's called what? You guys remember this? It's called an area rug. And it's called an area rug because it takes up area on the floor. It covers tiles, and tiles are square, or it might cover wood. Wood are rectangular, but we're not going to go there. Anyway, so you have an area rug, and so this takes up space. This area right here is our rug. So you have to kind of think of area of any rectangle in the same way. How much space does the rectangle have on the inside? And like I said, in most cases we use, all right, so here's a rectangle. It's in blue, and I've tried to do the purple as if it were graph paper. And so to figure out the area here, it'd be very easy because we just simply count up all of the squares that are inside. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9. It's 9 across. Now I could keep adding them or counting them. Or, so I could count them all up. Or I could go 9. It was 9 across. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. Or I could do multiplication, it'd be a lot faster. 9 times 5, I know my facts, is 45. 45 squares will fit inside the rectangle right there. So this is where your units come from for area, because it's the number of square units that fit inside that rectangle. In this particular case for this one, 45 square units will fit inside. If we wanted to know the perimeter, then we would just count the outside squares. And I will do that in red so you can see the perimeter. And those are just, remember, the police guys on the outside. We know that this is 9 and the other side is 5. That means this side is 5 and this other side is 9. So I could count them, or for perimeter, I could just simply add up the outsides. 9 plus 9 plus 5 plus 5. When I did that, I get 18 plus 10 is going to be 28. 28 just units because we just counted each space. All right, let's do another example. Okay, so we have our little guy here and he's inside a rectangle. And notice that the rectangle is not on grid paper. So how on earth are we ever going to figure this out? First of all, we need to know what the sides are. And they've told us that the sides for this one are 10 and 7. Now, again, there are no squares to count, and so therefore we have to rely on a formula. That formula for you is good for you because it is on the FCAT reference sheet. And it is area equals the base times the height. Now, if you can't remember that, over there in a little rectangle on the reference sheet, it tells you what B means. B is the base, and H is the height. All right, now let's go over to our figure. Let's identify first what the base and what the height are. Base usually means the bottom, so this part right here is the base. And then over here, either side, it would be considered the height. So let me write that in. Height is going up and down, just like you are. How tall are you? What's your height? It's how you measure from top to bottom. And the base is always on the bottom. Now, I see a little bit of a problem here because our formula asks for the base and it asks for the height. Well, I see the height, so let me write my formula again and substitute in what I know. I'm trying to find the area, so I'm not going to be putting that number in. I see that the height is 7, but I have no number here for the base. Does anybody know what that number should be? If you know anything about rectangles, you know that that number down there is the number what? 10. Exactly. So I could put in 10 for my base. These two numbers are next to each other. Remember that anytime any letters or numbers are next to each other without a symbol, that means for us to multiply. So snow cone it, and you get 7 times 10, which is 70. And remember that we're talking squares, even though we don't see them. It would be how many squares would fit in here, because 10 goes across and 7 goes down. So if we add up all the squares on the inside, count them, or multiply them, we would get 70 square units as the answer. All right. So let's do another example. All right, so here's a real world example of finding area. Miss Elliston would like our class to make a flower bed for the Stingray Sanctuary. She wants it to be a rectangle with a base of 20 and a height of 12. What is the area of this flower bed? So before we can even begin, let's look at some keywords here. Keywords being rectangle. Okay, so that gives us the shape that we're going to make. This gives us right here what the base should be of a rectangle and what the height of our rectangle is. So, and then we're also going to circle, are we finding area, or are we finding perimeter? So now that we have those key things, I'm going to begin my problem solving. First, I know it's going to be a rectangle. Okay, the other thing that I know is that the base is 20, so that's down here. and our height is 12. All right, and I know I'm finding area, but I can't remember what that silly formula is. So I pull out my handy dandy yellow FCAT handout and my cheat sheet, and I find out that the area of a rectangle is simply taking the base and the height and multiplying them together. So let's go ahead and put in those numbers since we have them. Our base is 20. And if you feel more comfortable writing it, here I'll change it because I know you guys are used to this. 20 times our height, which is 12. We're going to do the multiplication of that snow cone. And let me do my math over here because I don't want to mess up. Remember how to do double digit multiplication. We go 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 2 is 4. We're now starting with a 1, so I need to save the place. 1 times 0 is 0, and 1 times 2 is 2. So now we're going to add. So our area is 240 square, because that's how many squares we put in there. We region square, and we're going to use units because they didn't tell us feet or anything. So square units. And that would be how much the flower bed, the area of the flower bed. All right. So we go back and we check. Rectangle, check. Dimensions, check and check. And then we found the area, which is the inside here. Check that off. And our final answer has its units because it's a word problem. All right. Awesome. Now, you guys, I want you to practice a little bit. We could actually make a really cool addition to this problem. We could actually find out the perimeter and say, hey, we're going to put a fence around the flower bed, and that would be a whole new ball game. So we'll talk about that later, but what I'd like you to do is to get the notes and record your answers. Have a nice night.